Well, welcome, Vice-Chancellor, and thank you for taking the time to reflect on 2018 and also to think a little bit about what might happen in 2019.
Thanks, Michelle. It's good to be here. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Terrific. So how would you characterise the environment that Western Sydney had to operate in during 2018?
It's been a challenging year, as I'm sure all of our staff and our students will realise. Our staff in particular have had to operate in an environment where the federal government has made it very difficult for Australian universities this year in a range of ways. Most significantly, of course, is the funding freeze that's operated. So the Commonwealth has locked our funding this year at the 2017 levels. And that's been a challenge for us because we've had high demand for our courses. As many of our academic and professional staff will know across the university, we've seen increasing numbers right across the board, and that's been a challenge to respond to. But our Board of Trustees has been adamant that we should, as the university of this region and for this region, we should find ways to accommodate as many of those students as we can, which we've done this year, but it has placed stress on our staff. And I do acknowledge that, and I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our staff for the wonderful efforts throughout the year. It has been an outstanding year for the university, and it is our staff who make such a difference to the way in which we are so successful right across our operations in research and our academic programs and the way we support our staff and our students. So it's a great year in that sense, but it has been a challenge, and the environment has been challenging. And the environment is not challenging just because of the funding freeze. I think we've also seen a number of other policies from this government that have been remarkable, to say the least. I think the Federal Minister vetoing ARC grants in the humanities is one example of that, and most recently a decision by Dan Tehan to in fact, redirect research funding into regional universities impacted by the funding freeze. So these are very difficult and challenging decisions for the government to make, and we have to find ways to manage it when in Western Sydney we have huge demand. So to respond to your question, yes, it's been a challenging environment, but I'm pleased in the way we've responded to it.
Great. So in this context then, tell us a little bit about what you think have been the high points and particularly what you've been most proud of.
Oh, there's many things to be proud of about Western Sydney University, and I won't do justice to them by making a long list of things that we've done. I made a comment recently on Yammer, actually, about the success of one of our staff in the international context. And it was great to see. I'm a great supporter of Yammer as a means of communication internally. It gives us a great chance to share and to celebrate what's going on, as well as, at times, discussing some difficult issues. But we've had people achieving wonderful things here in Australia, here in Sydney, but equally around the world. So I certainly am very proud of the way our staff have continued to do great work within the university and in the community more broadly and internationally. I was in Nepal recently with two of our researchers in Nepal, and finding ways to support the community in the Langtan Valley is just one example, I think, of the great work we do, and many other examples of that. Opening our Liverpool campus this year, Narranura, was, I think, a very important moment for us, an important moment to establish a major new teaching and research facility in the heart of Liverpool. Been incredibly impressed by the response of the community to that new facility, so I see that certainly as a highlight. We also had the very emotional opening of the Auntie May foyer in honour of Auntie May Robinson, and to have Auntie May there to celebrate that was wonderful, but equally emotional to consider the connection between that campus and our Aboriginal communities of Western Sydney. So that was a very much a highlight, that new campus. The planning for our Bankstown campus has been equally, I think, exciting as we start to conceptualise that very substantial investment we'll make into the heart of Bankstown, another area where access and participation and opportunity is so important. So from that perspective, it's been very, very successful year. 21C curriculum project that Denise Kirkpatrick and Simon Barry have been working on. I've been very impressed with the progress we've made in teaching and learning, and in that project. I think it's a game-changing project for us. I know that in your school and others, Michelle, there are some exciting things happening. I know that Simon gave a presentation to the Board of Trustees recently and highlighting just the scale of what's been happening this year, what's planned for next year. And one piece of data that Simon provided was that 23,000 students next year, estimated 23,000 students, will touch some part of that first wave of 21C projects coming through. So it's on scale, and it is reflecting partnership pedagogy, working with students, co-designing with external stakeholders, all of the elements we need for the future of education and the future of work. So that's been a highlight, I think, the progress we've made in that regard. A lot to say about research. I won't try and pick it all out, but I will comment on our strategic research initiatives work that Deb Sweeney's been doing, and I'm looking forward to the announcement of our first wave of SRIs, because this is really representing that next set of emerging areas of research that we will be focusing on within the university. We've had wonderful outcomes from our existing research strengths, particularly in our institutes, but there's equally an opportunity to build and to celebrate the research capability we have more broadly. So I'm looking forward to that. I think our ERA submission this year highlighted, if you compare the last two ERA submissions, I think we're up something like 23% in terms of productivity and research outputs, and significantly up on research income as well. So that just highlights the journey we've been on, and particularly now that we see much more of our research funding coming from not necessarily the ARC or the NHMRC, but from industry and government and other areas. So in research, I think we've made some great advances this year, and we should celebrate that. We have moved forward with shared services, and that's something I know you and I will talk a little more about. And that's been challenging, and I acknowledge that. But importantly, we are making progress in the very important benefits that we want to see flow from that project, and working to address the gaps and the challenges, particularly that many of our academic staff have seen. So I think it's been a successful year. I won't keep listing the successes. In international, we've seen another bumper year in terms of attracting international students to Western Sydney, and we're looking forward to that continuing next year. But we've had 25% growth in international student numbers over the last 2 years. I better stop at that point, because I will miss something eventually, and there is much to be appreciative of in the university in 2018. So it's been a very, very good year.
Yeah. It's because in amongst all of that activity, one of the things that happens is it gives us an opportunity to develop new capabilities as an organisation. So from your position as Vice-Chancellor, what new capabilities have we developed as an organisation that we need to perhaps reflect on and take forward into 2019?
Well, I think we've certainly had to become an even more resilient organisation to begin with. You know, it's not simply that we have a difficult set of circumstances with funding from the Commonwealth, which will mean in 2019 something that's of concern to me is that we'll be freezing again the funding from the Commonwealth, but we'll also have to hold our domestic load fairly constant in 2019 compared to 2018. And yet every indicator tells me that we have very significant demand for our programs. And it concerns me that we can't meet that demand. The creation of the demand-driven system by Julia Gillard after the Bradley Review was an important sort of macroeconomic reform in this country. The freeze essentially has put a stop to it. It has created an environment where people aspiring to university won't have that opportunity in 2019, and that concerns me greatly. But to get to your point, capability-wise, yes, resilience. We've taken additional students, staff have been able to respond to the challenges of that. We had a very challenging My Voice survey this year, which I think is something we are reflecting on at the moment. I know a lot of work is going on right around the university at a local level to understand what are the priorities that need to be actioned in relation to the My Voice survey. At the institutional level, there were some serious questions around perceptions of leadership in the organisation, around change management, around communication, around collaboration. So at my level, of course, we need to be able to respond to those things, to reassure people that we're listening, and we will action a number of initiatives to respond to that. And I could go through those, but I think what's most important is that we're listening. We'll work through a prioritisation process over the next few months, and we'll work with staff during 2019 towards repeating the survey in 2020. One of the highlights, as perhaps a counterpoint to that this year, and I think again demonstrates the capacity we have in the organisation and our capabilities, is around restructure.
Yes.
So Sharon Bell's been leading, I think, a remarkable program of consultation and engagement right across the organisation to talk about what structures are appropriate for the next phase of our development. So again, we're in a change process. We've got to work through that very, very effectively. We're aiming to introduce the new structures in 2020, and the paper will be released in the next few weeks. It goes to the Board of Trustees that provides more detail around that. So I've certainly seen an organisation that's increasingly resilient. I've seen an organisation that is increasingly positive about the region that we're in and being able to respond to the opportunities for our region, and I think that positions us well. You know, we are a highly ranked institution now. We continue to see ranking systems around the world putting us in the top 2%, consistently in the top 2%. I was very pleased last week to see US News and Times Higher Ed rankings give us a list of disciplines in which we are top 100 in the world, top 100 in the world, and in a number of occasions top 10 in Australia. So there's much for us to be proud of, and I think it demonstrates that, yes, we are an adaptive, resilient, responsive organisation.
Yeah. So in amongst all that capability building, as I'm listening to you, Vice-Chancellor, I also hear that there are some hints of some unfinished business, some things that we must, I think, pick up next year in order to continue on the journey. Could you talk a little bit about what that unfinished business is?
I think every university in Australia, and probably most universities around the world, have a long list of unfinished business that they need to deal with in a raft of ways. At one end of that spectrum, the unfinished business, in a sense, is the fact that, you know, we're in a world being disrupted by technology, and our sector is being disrupted by technology, and we need to find ways to engage with that. I'm again very interested in our decadal planning process that, again, Sharon's been leading over the last few months, coming out of a conversation with the Board of Trustees in the middle of the year and saying, well, we have to start looking beyond the immediate sets of concerns, challenges, difficulties, problems that we face in a 2 or 3 year horizon, which has historically been what universities do. They plan over a relatively short-term horizon. But to start looking out a decade or more and saying, well, how can we position ourselves to be a successful university in the long term? So we need, in terms of unfinished business, to continue to work on the way in which we'll adapt in a digitally disrupted world. And I think one of the ways that we're demonstrating some strength in that area is that we have, and I think ITDS under Kerry Holling and Peter Pickering has done a great job in positioning the university well in the technology space, the way we're using technologies in our teaching spaces, the way we are looking at our digital future, the way we are looking at future models for our campuses, Liverpool and Bankstown. This gives us a real sense of being at the cutting edge and trying new ideas. Some of them will be successful, others may be less so, but at least we're trying new things. So there's a lot to be done in that space, importantly. I think the other clearly unfinished business is really around our work in shared services within our organisation, the very clear messages that came through the My Voice survey and how we respond to that, how we can reassure our staff broadly about what we're doing to address those sorts of concerns, that we do listen. We'll do what we can to find the resources to invest to address those concerns, and how we can work collegially and collaboratively to do that. So there's certainly unfinished business in that context. And perhaps the last bit of unfinished business for Australian higher education is a Commonwealth, a federal election in 2019, at some point, probably the first half of the year, a state election in March, so we know the date of the state election. These are two pivotal moments in our national context. The New South Wales state election is important because, you know, we have been in Western Sydney seeing significant investment by state government. We have a Labor opposition in New South Wales that's supportive of important elements of that investment, but we need to see the next 4 years in New South Wales consolidating, and we can see the university benefiting from that consolidation. Equally, at the federal level, we have, I think, federal Labor with particularly strong views about higher education, which I think are consistent with the message that we see as an important one, and that is let's return to the demand-driven system. But at the same time, we need to be sure that our TAFE system, something I know you're passionate about,
absolutely.
our TAFE system, our vocational training system is and remains one of the best in the world. It needs investment. So we have a question mark over the, if you like, the architecture of tertiary education. That's unfinished business. So, and a coalition that's been in a challenging relationship with higher ed. So we need to look at all of that. That's unfinished business. We need to work with those governments, state and federal, next year of any political persuasion to ensure that Western Sydney and our agenda and our region, our students, our communities get the support that they need so we can continue to see the transformation of Western Sydney. So there's a lot of unfinished business, I think.
Yeah. But a lot of excitement, I think, in thinking about how that will continue on that journey that you talked about, which is the transformation. So one last question. What have you learned from this year that will inform what you might do next year?
Look, I hope on a daily basis I'm learning something about our organisation, about our university, about our communities, about our partners more broadly, and that influences the way we, in a very constructive and positive way, move forward. I think it's very clear this year, we've had clear messages that the change process that we are going through, which has been, and I acknowledge it's been almost unrelenting change now for 3 years, with preparation for restructure in 2020 to come next year. So the change will continue. I think it's a very clear message that we need to manage change in new and better ways than I think we've done that historically at the university. And that's not a criticism. I think we have applied the best principles we could to the way in which we wanted to go about changing the organisation, but that still has caused anxieties and difficulties for many of our staff. And I think that's something that I'm taking out of 2018 into planning for introducing restructure in 2020. One of the reasons I decided to defer our academic restructure from 2019 to 2020 was in recognition that I don't think as an organisation we're ready for it yet. I think there are a number of things we have to test and a number of propositions that we have to engage with our colleagues about before we make that step into a structure with more schools and different meta structures and different disciplinary structures that we hope will be another important transformation for Western Sydney University. So there's a lot to learn from that. And I think as a Vice-Chancellor, I hope I'm always learning, as we all should be, in the environments that we find ourselves. And this is an exciting place to be. And I hope at the end of a very busy year where people are feeling a little tired, that they look back and recognise what's been a great 2018.
Vice-Chancellor, I think you've helped us to do that very much by the reflections that you've shared with us today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle.